This is Transit Unplugged. I'm Paul Comfort, and on today's episode of the podcast, we have a special treat for you. We have as our guest, really the top transportation official in the world from the largest transit system, Andrew Lord, or Andy Lord. He is the Commissioner of Transport for London, TfL. He's London's most senior transport official, been in the job now for over a year. He was appointed on an interim basis in October of 2022 after his predecessor, Andy Byford, left the agency. Now he has been appointed on the permanent basis in June of 2023, so just about a year holding the position. And on today's episode, we talk about everything you think we would talk about. His background, his career, some of the big challenges and successes of the agency, what's happening with congestion charging and the ultra-low emission zone. Those have special importance in the U.S. as the city of New York is moving toward congestion charging next month. We talk about microtransit and e-bikes, the new Superloop bus service with routes around the city, the bus franchising model, how it works there in London and how it's spreading throughout the UK, some new technologies that TfL is looking to embrace in the future, and how they're moving toward a zero-emission fleet and how that's all working there, the Elizabeth line, and so many more things. I think you're really going to enjoy this deep dive into the world's largest transit system with the Commissioner of Transport for London, Andy Lord. And if you enjoy the podcast after you listen to it, leave us a rating wherever you listen, whether it's on Apple iTunes, Spotify, or somewhere else. Leave us a rating and a comment so we can know what you think, and it'll help more ears get to listen to the good news of public transportation. Now let's dive into our conversation with Andy Lord, Commissioner of Transport for London. Thank you so much, Andy, for joining us on the show.
Pleasure, Paul. Thanks for the invite and delighted to join you.
Yeah, great to have you. We've been working on this for probably 9 months. As soon as you got appointed back in October, I think I was emailing you saying, hey, you want to come on? And I think you said, hey, let me get my feet wet a little bit first. So anyway, glad to have you on. You're coming up to celebrate your first full year as the official commissioner, right?
Correct. Yeah, I was appointed in June last year. I held the position on an interim basis after my predecessor, Andy Byford, left in October. So yeah, coming up to, I guess, 18 months in total, but 12 months officially. It's been a really action-packed first year, really proud of what we've achieved and hugely honoured and privileged to be leading London's transport system.
From what I hear, it's going amazing. You're doing an amazing job. I know I'm on the other side of the pond here, but I stay in tune with what's happening there. And maybe, if you don't mind, give us a few glimpses into, the highlights of the year, how you feel things have gone, any big projects you've undertaken and how they're going.
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I say, it's been a momentous year, actually, for us as an organisation. For the first time in our history, we've achieved an operating surplus, financial perspective. So cover the costs of our operations for the first time in TfL's history, which is a remarkable achievement. It's a £3.1 billion turnaround over the last 3 years. So that's, at a business level, that's hugely important. Of course, every pound of surplus we make is a pound we reinvest into the network and into our customers and into our colleagues. At an operational level, we've completed what we call the Superloop, which is our express bus network around outer London. It's been hugely successful. That's gone from literally being an idea on a small piece of paper to the launch of 9 routes around the whole of outer London in about 9 months, which is a remarkable achievement. I'm hugely proud of everybody involved with that. We completed the final phase of the Elizabeth line. So Andy, my predecessor, who you know well, did an amazing job getting the Elizabeth line actually open and connected. But we did the final timetable uplift in May last year. We're now running 24 trains an hour through the central section, connecting Heathrow in the west to Shenfield in the east. It's carried well over 350 million passengers in the year, which is a remarkable achievement with huge levels of customer satisfaction and operational performance, which we're really, really proud of. So there's those elements. We've, of course, London, as you know, has huge number of ceremonial events and events like the London Marathon. We, of course, had the coronation of Their Majesties King Charles III and Queen Camilla. That was a huge event for the city and the nation, but it was a huge event for TfL in terms of our role of managing the transport for the coronation. And they've done a huge amount on our net zero journey. Of course, the expansion of the ultra-low emission zone in August last year, the largest low emission zone in the world. London is the leading city, really is driving air quality improvement. That was an immense task and it's gone extremely well. So they're just some of the highlights. I've missed many out. But hugely grateful for the incredible colleagues that we have across TfL who've done such amazing things over the last year.
Well, bravo to you. Tell how big is TfL? Kind of give us a scope of, the types of service you operate, how many employees, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so depending what measure you use, we are the largest integrated public transport authority in the world. So we run all the buses in London. We have a fleet of 9,000 buses, largest fleet of buses in Europe. Half of all buses in the UK are in London. We run the Underground, the oldest metro system in the world, about 600 trains operating each day. Between the buses and the tube, they carry about 8 to 9 million passengers a day. We then have London Overground, the Docklands Light Railway, the London Trams, the Elizabeth Line. They carry between about another 3 million passengers per day. So we're carrying about 11 to 12 million passengers a day across London. We're also responsible for the strategic road network, all the traffic signals in London, river services, the Woolwich Ferry, which is a ferry in the east, London Cable Car, just for good measure. And then we have the cycle hire scheme as well. And we license all the taxi and private hire vehicles across the city. We have about 28,000 colleagues directly employed by TfL across all those services. And then we have another 25,000 bus drivers who are employed by companies on our behalf. And then about another 20,000 across the wider supply chain providing services on our behalf. And then on top of that, TfL is directly responsible for about 100,000 jobs in the wider supply chain and industry across the UK. Our operating costs, about £9 billion a year. And I say we just achieved our first operating surplus, which isn't public yet, but it'll be round about £100 million. So that sort of hopefully gives this scale of size of what we do.
That's amazing. Tell us about the structure of TfL. You're part of the city government there, right? Under the mayor.
Correct. We're a public sector organisation, wholly owned subsidiary of the Greater London Assembly, which was a devolved part of government that London has its own governance, if you like, within the UK. The mayor is responsible for leading that. We actually have the London mayoral election is taking place tomorrow. It happens every 4 years. So I'll know the weekend who the new mayor will be, or if it's the same mayor. The mayor is currently chair of TfL. So we have a board of non-executives appointed by the mayor. We have a deputy mayor of transport who is our deputy chair. So my day-to-day dealings with the deputy mayor, but the mayor holds me and our executive to account. So then the London-wide Assembly, who are also being elected tomorrow, they then hold both the mayor and myself to account in terms of how we spend public funds and that side of it. And then we get the majority of our funding through passenger income, obviously, but we do get devolved funding through what we call business rates, which comes from London businesses and homeowners. Through the COVID pandemic, we've received grant funding from central government, but prior to the pandemic, that had all gone. So we were standing on our own 2 feet. Because of the dire impact the pandemic had on our finances, we went to government and we've received funding from them. But we're now on our own 2 feet again at an operating level. So the government, if we make a suitable business case, they will provide us with funding for major infrastructure and fleet renewals going forward. But otherwise, we now stand on our own 2 feet.
Tell me about your background, coming from the airline industry and how you ended up where you're at.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer by background. I did an apprenticeship and degree, very fortunately sponsored by British Airways. I worked for BA for 26 years straight from school, held numerous roles with them, including time out at Boeing in Seattle, a lot of time in the UK regions. Ended up on BA's executive committee for about 7.5 years. Left BA in 2015 on very good terms, but it felt like it was the right time to leave. I'd done 26 years with them. I had an amazing career and time with the airline, and I'm very, very fond of it. Spent some time with a company called John Menzies, who are a big aviation services provider, running UK, Europe, Middle East, Africa, and India. I worked for them for about 2.5 years and had a very successful period with them. And then left and was approached to join TfL as managing director of the Tube. Just 4 months before the pandemic I started. So I've been here just coming up to 5 years. I was MD of the Tube for most of that time. Became COO when Andy Byford restructured us in February 22. And then, as we've already discussed, Commissioner at the end of 2022. I also am a non-executive director for one of the subsidiaries of the UK Ministry of Defence. So I sit on the board of their procurement agency, which is really interesting and gives a different insight into how government works and, of course, a critical role for supporting the UK's armed forces. So I do that. I've also been a non-exec director for the UK's air traffic control organisation for 8 years. So quite a broad background, but all in transport operations engineering.
So what lessons did you take? I know there's probably tons of them, but one or two that, from the aviation industry that you were able to apply in the public transit industry. I mean, both of them are people in big silver tubes, right? But one's in the air, one's on the ground, and one's run by government, the other's run by private companies. So tell us your observations on that.
Yeah, so I mean, the most obvious one is obviously the absolute focus on safety and security. All transport sectors have to be absolutely focused. What we do is safety critical. How you mitigate risk, how we ensure we keep our customers safe, how we keep our colleagues safe is a big focus. And, rightly, our customers take that for granted, but we must never take that for granted. So there's a lot of similarity there between aviation and transport or transit. I think aviation are a bit more proactive. They're a bit more forward thinking in terms of thinking about future risks and how can they use technology to offset that. And I'm encouraging us to do more to think about that. How can we, particularly as we move forward more into digital signaling? And I think that's a big, big benefit. As you say, massive people leadership and trade union similarities. We have the most amazing colleagues in TfL who are passionate about the brand. We need to do more to really put them at the heart of making TfL a great place to work. And I'm a great believer if you treat people with respect, then they will treat you with respect. And at the same time, if you make them happy in their employment, they will deliver better service to your customers, to our customers, which then grows more customers onto the network. So they're the big similarities. Of course, from a TfL perspective, we're at both ends of the technology and the asset life cycle, if you like. We still have assets that were built by the Victorians in the 1800s and are still in use today. And we have the most amazing people who do incredible things, maintaining and keeping those structures in place. And then at the other end, we have the latest 21st century technology, putting the latest signaling systems in, bringing new trains in. Elizabeth Line is the best example of that. So it's a real mix of the old and the new, whereas in aviation, it's typically nothing's more than about 20, 25 years old generally. Right. Whereas, we've got the oldest fleet of trains running in the UK with the Bakerloo line fleet. They are 52 years old this year. Wow. And, our teams are doing amazing jobs keeping them running. So big capital intensive businesses. And, our customers expect us to deliver safe and reliable services. Generally we do that very well.
Yes, I'd say you do. That's great. Last time I was in London, I rode the Elizabeth line, by the way. And I mean, just bravo, and just fantastic. It's the way it should be done. So, and you contract out a lot, but like that goes to MTR, right? They're running them. And I had the guy that's the managing director there on the show one time, but talk to us about that franchising model some. Last time I was in London, in the UK, I did a big tour of a bunch of agencies and interviewed them. And at the time, some of them were talking about taking the franchising model from London and making it theirs. I think Transport for Manchester maybe is looking at that now. And the agency there, TfL, really is the model for the country. And now it's spreading everywhere, right?
Yeah, so we actually have two slightly different models in terms of our franchise and concession. So on the rail side of it, we have both the overground, the Elizabeth line, the DLR and trams, where the actual operation of the trains is done through a third party, through a commercial contract. They staff the stations, their drivers drive the trains. In one model, they do the maintenance of the trains as well. In another model, and they're responsible for the contract management of that. In the other model, we do it ourselves in trams, for example. On the infrastructure, again, in some cases, we're the infrastructure manager. So the Elizabeth line central section and trams, we are. On the overground, actually, as part of the National Rail Network. So they do that. And on DLR, the concession does it. So DLR is 100% concession run.
Yes.
Elizabeth line is a hybrid. The overground is a hybrid and trams is a hybrid. Okay. So that's the sort of rail model. And then, of course, we have the tube, which is 100% in-source, bar from some maintenance activities. On the buses is quite different. So on the buses, it is actually contracted out route by route. So we have, off the top of my head, I think it's 8 different bus operating companies who all operate under the TfL roundel. They all operate red buses. They have a minimum standard in terms of what the customers expect and see. It's managed through our main control center, but each operating company is contracted to operate those routes on whatever the right commercial terms are, based on the frequency we want, based on route length. And we're using that very much at the moment of how we continue to roll out to try and achieve our objective of every bus in London being zero emission, currently by 2034, but we're looking to see how we can accelerate to 2030. And it has proven to be very successful. It's kept costs low. London has the lowest fares for buses in the UK compared to anywhere else. The operating companies can make a return. I think we're going through a point now, though, where we're looking at between ourselves and the bus operating companies if the commercial structure needs reviewing, particularly in light of the investment that's needed, both for the infrastructure and for the additional buses going forward. So there'll probably be some slight changes over the next 12, 18 months. But as you say, the model has proven to be very successful. It's delivered a huge service benefit to the city, and it's now been adopted by Manchester in particular, who are rolling that out on a very similar basis. And we've supported them in doing that so they can learn from our mistakes, but also learn from where we have got it right.
You mentioned moving to zero emission buses. Here in the U.S., we've had a really interesting situation, challenging. We've gone from 5 manufacturers of buses that are made in America, so to speak, because we have rules about, if you use federal funds, you have to have 70% of the bus by America. Now we're down to basically 2 or 3. And there's big, long lines, 2 or 3 years waiting lines in a lot of cases. Are you having any challenges like that in the UK and the OEM supply side?
Not quite as bad as that. I mean, the bus manufacturing industry are picking up a lot more orders now. We have 2 main manufacturers in the UK, and then obviously there's a number in Europe. And there are still a lot of buses being manufactured which are pure diesel, not for London. And we were talking before about, particularly in the north of Scotland, where I don't think there are any electric vehicles because they don't perform as well in the extreme cold. So diesel is better. The challenge we've got, as I said, we've got 9,000 buses. We've got about 1,400 at the minute of those are all electric. We've got a very small fleet of about 20, 25 hydrogen buses. To go to full zero emission, we need another 7,000 buses over the next 7 years or so. So we've got to think about how we work with the industry to make sure there is the manufacturing capacity to do that. We're doing some smart thinking around. We have, of those 7,000 existing buses, they're all low emission hybrid buses. How can we work with other cities in the country to roll out our existing hybrid buses to cities and towns that currently just have normal emission diesel buses? They can get a low emission vehicle at a lower price. That enables us to work with manufacturers to then bring in new zero emission buses. So it's how we can be more smart in terms of working with other parts of the UK and the bus manufacturers to keep that supply of buses going forward. But the manufacturers are going to have to look at how they increase capacity, and we're going to have to think about, will it be acceptable for us to go and buy buses, or our operators to buy buses from Europe, for example? And some do. We have Volvo buses, for example, which are a very good model. So that there is, at the minute, supply is not an issue. But the reality is, if we want to achieve our objective of going fully zero emission by 2030, it is going to be a big challenge.
Yeah. Let's talk about congestion charging. There's a lot of interest about that here in the U.S. now, as New York City is the first American city to adopt that model from the UK and Singapore and other places who have tried it. They're going to start it actually next month, where people will have to pay a set fee to get into the congested downtown area south of 60th in Manhattan. How's that working in London? And maybe any comments on ULEZ, the ultra low emission zone that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so we actually have 3 elements to this in London. We have the congestion chargers in the core of London. It's been in place for a number of years now, works very effectively, has had a direct benefit on both traffic volumes and air quality. The mayor then launched the low emission zone about 5-6 years ago, which had a marked improvement in air quality. And then, as we said, we launched the ultra low emission zone, which basically covers not entirely, but largely the area within the M25 motorway around London. It's not a complete zone, but it's not far off. It's all done through ANPR, automatic number plate recognition, through cameras. The data is managed through a third party for us, and it works very effectively. The go live that we had on August 29th last year went very smoothly. It doesn't cause any congestion or backlog. There's no entering of gates. There's no toll gates. There's no barriers. It's all done by cameras. So from a road user perspective, it's almost simple, but it's very efficient and very effective. And there will be a report in the next month or so, which will show 6 months on what the impact and benefits have been of the ultra low emission zone expansion. We're expecting it to be very significant. We've already know from our own data that the number of compliant vehicles has increased, and therefore by default, the air quality should have improved. And we've seen some congestion improvements as well. And this is all about, at the same time, some people will say this is us having a war on motorists. It absolutely isn't. It's around improving air quality. At the same time, if it delivers some traffic easing, that's great. But it's also around how we provide alternative public transport options for people in the outer areas of the city. So that's why we launched the Superloop. We're looking at doing more bus services in outer London. So, some areas, particularly south of the Thames, have little or poor rail services. There's not much. If you look at the underground map, there's very few tube lines that go south of the River Thames because of the ground conditions of when the tube was built. So people south of the river are very reliant on buses, national rail, or their car, and we need to give them more choice.
And so the money from the congestion charging and ULEZ goes in to help you expand the service?
Yeah, so all the proceeds from both the congestion charging and ULEZ are reinvested back into public transport. As I say, all the income we get is focused on ensuring that we invest in the public transport network. Ultimately, our business plan shows that our net income will be flat because the number of vehicle compliance will increase, and therefore, there is only a charge for ULEZ if your vehicle is not compliant.
Right.
Congestion charge is a charge because it's in a zone where we want to reduce the number of vehicles, but that's a pretty steady number now. But the ULEZ, but we expect that income to actually reduce over the next couple of years.
As people get cleaner cars.
Indeed.
Yeah. So tell us about what's the role of TfL with microtransit? Like, we're coming into warmer weather now. People want to get the e-bikes or scooters or whatever. Are you all involved in that at all? And if so, how's it going?
Yeah, so we have our own cycle hire scheme, the Santander Cycle Hire. It's largely in the inner parts of London.
Okay.
We have a combination of both e-bikes and old school bikes. We're looking to increase our fleet of e-bikes. There's a lot of competition now with the sort of just the line bikes and forest bikes and that sort of thing, which are undocked. And we're working closely through the London boroughs to see how we can be a bit more coordinated on that, because that creates a few challenges. We're also responsible for what we call micro-mobility, so the trial of e-scooters. E-scooters are actually illegal in the UK, privately owned ones. They can't be ridden legally on the roads, on the pavements. But the government launched a trial, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, through a certain number of providers in towns and cities across the UK with geofenced scooters that can be parked in only certain locations, and you hire them and then can sort of ride the last mile or so. So we're responsible for running that trial. It's proving quite popular. And I think there's more to be done around how we have greater coordination and understanding how it all fits together. So we're responsible for that. And it's an important part of how what we call deliver the last mile journey. So people come into town on the train, they either get the bus, they walk, they cycle, or they scoot. And we want to give people that flexibility. Yeah. So because we have a target of trying to get 80% of people in London using public transport, walking or cycling.
That's good. Coming near the end of our interview now, but on today, the day that we're talking, May Day, May 1st, my new book, The New Future of Public Transportation, is officially launched. And in the book, I've got a chapter from Simon Reed, who worked with you guys for a long time there, doing data, et cetera. Now he's a consultant, I guess. But it made me think about the technologies that are coming. This book is largely about what's coming for us, whether it's cybersecurity, which is so important for transit agencies now, to AI, whatever. So I want your thoughts, if you could, Andy. You're heading up the biggest transit system in the world. What do you see coming for us, and how is TfL preparing for it when it comes to technology?
Wow. Congratulations on the book, by the way.
Thank you.
So
I'll send you a copy.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have an abundance of data and technology. We use it a huge amount for travel demand management, for helping predict and plan for the future of the city, for future services. We're also, we have our own app called TfL Go, which we're looking to develop further so we can give people real-time information through that. That will go live later this year with payment options as well. We're looking to see what more we can do. We, as you know, created the first contactless payment system, Oyster. We then actually created the contactless payment system, that we all love and use now across the world. So we're thinking about what more can we do? What's the next sort of generation of ticketing? What's the next generation of enabling people access onto the network? How do we work with the likes of Google, Microsoft, Amazon, whoever, into data of the future? And as technology develops, so we give people the opportunity to move more freely, but ensuring we capture the revenue that we need and then use that to the best of our ability. We do a huge amount of technology, obviously, on future vehicles, be it buses, be it trains. We're not doing so much on autonomous vehicles at the moment, but I think clearly some cities are, and I think we need to look at that. We do a lot around how we use it for traffic signaling. We use some really smart technology, some of which is come from the ballistic missile systems the military use, to how we predict when traffic is flowing and not flowing so that we can speed up the traffic flows across the city. So, and then AI, I mean, who knows?
Right.
I wouldn't even try and pretend I understand it. If anything, I'm probably a little scared of it. But I have no doubt that AI is going to play a significant role for the future, whether or not it's during my tenure or one of my successors' tenures. But yeah, I think we need to embrace it, but we need to do it in a way that is controlled and with appropriate governance and regulation.
That's great. You know, I did an interview this week for a thing called the Transit Talent. It's a e-newsletter. And one of the questions was, what's your favorite or what's the best transit system in the world? And I talked about some of the cities I've visited. I think I've been to 80 cities around the world doing this podcast and our TV show and visited their transit agencies. But I said, you know, the number one agency in the world has to be TfL. I mean, it's got it all, and it's well run, and it's woven into the fabric of the city so that it's seen, you know, not as just something for some people to ride, but it's something for everyone. So from my perspective, Andy, you know, you've done it, and your predecessors, you reached the pinnacle. Not only are you the biggest, but in my opinion, you're the best. So congratulations and bravo on that. And any last thoughts you have for our audience of people around the world in the 100 countries that listen to the podcast? Anything you'd like to share?
Well, thank you for your kind words, Paul. I mean, I'm incredibly proud of what we do, but we're not complacent. I think there's a lot more we can do. Our system is not as accessible as we would like it to be for people who have disabilities. So there's a big focus for us on that. I've moved away from us saying we're the best and the greatest. All that's it. We're very proud of what we do. Well, that's great. But we've had a bit of a reputation in the past of saying we are the best.
Okay.
Actually, I want us still to learn. There are many other organizations out there, some of whom are clearly much better financially backed in terms of the investment they're making. But we need to make sure we learn from other cities and other transport networks to see how can we take the best of those other organizations? How can we learn from their use of technology so that we can really make sure we're maximizing and investing in the right things for the future of London? We are doing whatever we can now to make our system even more integrated so that it becomes more seamless for customers going forward. And I just, you know, for all your listeners who have used the system and do use the system, thank you. We're very grateful. Please come and visit if you haven't. And yeah, please do come and see us in London. We are really proud of what we do. And so you can see everything here, from the amazing new Elizabeth line to almost our heritage line on the Bakerloo line, the driverless DLR through to cycle schemes, road networks, you name it. We're really proud of it. So thank you. Yeah.
Congratulations. And I think that's a great attitude, you know, humble, still wanting to learn. That's the way you'll grow, right? I mean, the only constant is change. And so TfL, I know, will continue to adapt and grow under your leadership. We wish you the very best there. And thank you so much, Andy, not only for what you do for the industry, but for sharing it with us today on Transit Unplugged.
My pleasure, Paul.
This is Tris Hussey, editor of the Transit Unplugged podcast. Thank you for listening to this episode of Transit Unplugged with our guest, Andy Lord, Commissioner for Transport for London. Coming up next week on the show, we have a special Transit Leaders panel recorded live at TripSpark Ignite. Hey, are you a fan of Transit Unplugged? Well, I bet you are. And I bet you know someone who might also like the show. So take a moment, share the show with a friend, and make them part of our transit enthusiast community. Transit Unplugged is brought to you by Modaxo. At Modaxo, we're passionate about moving the world's people. And at Transit Unplugged, we're passionate about telling those stories. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.